So good afternoon to the next session, the third session of this day on financing climate adaptation in urban areas. So I don't have the overview who has stayed from the last session and who joined from another session. So those ones who came to the session, most welcome. We had during the morning presentations from Portugal and from Denmark, new innovative ways how to finance adaptation measures in the cities to make the cities more climate resilient. We will now move to Central Eastern Europe area. I have to admit that still a lot is to be done there, and there is quite a high need in working on adaptation measures in that area, in that region. We have encountered, looking at various funding programs, European funding programs that we see that we would wish to encourage cities from Central and Eastern Europe to participate more actively in the programs and share their experiences with other cities, or also learn from experience from other cities. Now, the example Bratislava from Slovakia is also working on adaptation measures since several years. Ms. Eva Strebarova, I hope it's spelled out correctly. You're working at the city at the city of Bratislava in the office of the chief architect, and we were just talking about the resin project, that you are involved in the resin project, which is going on since a couple of years, and you're sharing with various cities, municipalities, your experiences on disaster risk management and the effect of disasters on infrastructure, particularly. That could be any kind of disasters, and of course we have here an interlinkage between, let's say, man-made disasters and the nature disasters, but of course all disasters are related to populated areas. In areas where we don't have a population, there is, a nature disaster is not a disaster if people are not affected by it. But in the cities, of course, we are. So I think that's a very good example to look at these both sides, disaster risk management, vulnerability assessments in that regard, and adaptation to climate change, which is causing increasingly disasters. And you are accompanied by your colleague, Martina Ticha. Is that correct? Good, thanks. So you are head of the project management unit, and you're working on the strategy and projects department at Bratislava. You're developing projects, and you're project manager for climate change adaptation projects in this regard. And I would like to invite you to present, as we did during the last session, a presentation of 30 minutes, and then we would have a time for question and answers from the audience. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will talk about the story of Bratislava city in using of grants of European Economic Area for implementation of climate adaptation measures. So basically, the City Hall of Bratislava is... So introduction was done by moderator. And Bratislava is located in Central Europe. The city is bordering Austrian and Hungarian border as the closest in all Europe and a second in worldwide scope. Population is about 500,000 inhabitants, and we can say that So presentation will consist of a story about climate change challenges that Bratislava face, then overview of the milestones and actions that Bratislava has done and plans and is on them. Then the major part of the talk will be about the using of the grants of EA or Norwegian grants for climate change adaptation measures, and the colleague will talk and discuss in details the future plans, the details about this project that we already finished and we are also implementing, and then also interlinkage with lessons learned. Bratislava city is located in Central Europe on both river banks of Danube River, in close neighborhood of forests of Carpathian Mountains, and this location affords to the city very favorite and moderate climate. However, due to climate change, also Bratislava city already experienced rise in temperature, this average temperature, also more frequent summer heat waves, longer period of droughts, and which are alternated with extreme rainfalls, which can result to pluvial floods. And so these risks Bratislava is facing for last years, and we as a city, really for example, in last year, we had, and all this region had 4 heat waves in the summer, or starting not even in summer months, but in May or June. And also it was this new record of total number of tropical nights, that means those above drop below 20 degrees of Celsius, that counted for 31 in total. The period of droughts, when we are talking about that, so recent period of droughts in Bratislava lasted more than 7.5 months. And it was, as you can see, from December 2016 to July last year. So all these extreme weather events can cause risk and can influence damages in the city, and also to city infrastructure and population health, and also other potential problems that can be and must be reflected by the city and the policies that we shall adapt. Also, it is very likely that also other extreme weather events can be more frequent, for speaking about windstorms and snow calamities and so on. Bratislava faces maybe the most important risks and challenges that we can divide in some 3 main areas. First is protecting of the most vulnerable groups of urban population, as Bratislava has significant number of or ratio of elderly people, as is historical city, and has a historical center that is inhabited with many of these alone living people and elderly people. So this is big risks to this population health. The second area of our interest is to minimize the carbon footprint of the city and concentrate on sustainable buildings and transport and low carbon emissions actions of the city. And the third one is third major area of interest is to implement adaptation and mitigation measures to maximize the rainwater management and support using green infrastructure and blue solutions, blue and green solutions. If talking about these areas, Bratislava City has carried out a number of projects, mostly supported by EU funds and also with European economical grants. We can mention, for example, resin projects, that is climate resilient cities and infrastructure projects implemented within Horizon 2020 program, where Bratislava is one of 4 case cities together with Manchester, Bilbao and Paris, and where the tailor-made solutions are implemented and invented in cooperation with our partners. Then there are projects that are aimed at buildings that can have zero emission or sustainable solutions. There are EU Google, EPO Urban and ELENA projects. EU Google was supported within 7th Framework EU program. EPO Urban, it was from Interreg Central Europe, and ELENA projects are supported with European Investment Bank grants, especially to support Bratislava energy action plans and the sustainable buildings. Then we have also this electromobility projects that is supported and started last year. It's Urban E, and Bratislava benefits from this grant of Connecting Europe facility together with Ljubljana and Zagreb cities, also with support with private companies and their funds. Also, there are implementation of these green and soft measures of policies and measures for adaptation and mitigation measures, and these projects were especially supported with these grants of European Economic Area, and we will talk about them later. So if we are talking about the city adaptation pathway, we can, as many other European cities, Bratislava adopted the Covenant of Mayors as a kind of first step about strategic policy, joining some climate adaptation measures. So it went 2012. Together with this covenant, the city started implemented the Sustainable Energy Action Plan. It was 1 year later, and after Bratislava signed the Mayor's Adapt, the city has adopted also strategy for climate change adaptation of the city. That was approved in 2014. Besides these strategies and policies, city, of course, had to implement kind of projects that supported these talks and words, also in practice. Bratislava was or benefited from big grant from European Economical Area called Bratislava is Preparing for Climate Change projects that lasted from 2014 to last year that we successfully finished it. And also from 2015 we implement the project that is soft project, this resin project supported from EU funds. These two big projects helped to the city, besides the infrastructure pilot projects, also invent or prepare the action plan of the city for climate change. That was approved by the City Council last year in April. We can also mention that Bratislava joined also the core group of EU cities supporting the new urban water agenda, and as the Bratislava is located on this Danube River, so water management and rainwater management are kind of one of crucial task of city that still has carry on. Bratislava, due to its high GDP ratio, is restricted and was restricted from use of many of implementation and financing tools from many EU programs, but we could use these European economic area grants, or called Norwegian grants, that are still in use and offered to the countries of Central and Eastern region. And we can really say that these are very good opportunities, and that can be used by many cities or countries, also villages, that maybe are not eligible or have problems with implementation of other kinds of financing tools in finance from EU mechanism. European Economic Area grants are grants of contribution of donor states of Ireland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, and they were firstly prioritizing countries of former socialism regimes in Central and Eastern countries, and they were aimed at supporting of these areas that always are agreed with the national governments of respective countries and the donor states. So many of these priorities are kind of country-oriented. So each one shall consult the eligibility and the project that would love to plan with the government or the contact point of this mechanism. We can say that in the last programming period that lasted from 2009 till, or it was called 2009 till 2014, but implementation was finished last year. So these grants had allocation up to 4 million euros, and they were concentrating on these countries of Central and Eastern Europe region. Last implementation period was the second one. Now the current programming period started in 2014 and shall last till 2021. But at least as far we know, so the first calls for the project started only this year. So kind of planning and implementation period after long periods or long time of preparation and talking with the national governments and the donor states took almost 2 years. So if there are any towns or villages or other organization that would like to try to ask or apply for these grants, so this is the time for starting talking or checking the possibilities of this financial mechanism. We can say that really this allocation for this programming period was increased 2 or 20 times more. So as we can see, for all these countries is allocated about 80 or more than 87 million euros for climate change adaptation measures. And when I checked the possibilities, they are still on paper, so simply one shall check much more in details. So besides the CE countries, there are also Portugal and Spain included in this mechanism now. And Portugal has also allocation for climate change adaptation. Spain has environmental and climate change related research and technology. So it's, there are options also not only for soft activities but also for infrastructure, and many times the pilot actions that were not tried or maybe can be modeled for respective regions or cities. There are also, besides the climate change area, there is also energy efficiency allocation for much more budget. Talking about this Slovak successful projects that were paid from the Norwegian funds, or as we call them, Norwegian funds, because part of the, or major part of the grants are from donor states from Norway. That were allocated for adaptation to climate change and prevention of floods and droughts, was allocated for up to 15 million of euros. And these activities were aimed especially at adaptation of water basins, the water retention systems. So I will 10 minutes to Eva. Okay. Also, so two big cities from Slovakia benefited from this grant mechanism, and Bratislava was one of them. Also, we had Slovak government had small grants program for schools. So that was oriented on soft measures and also the implementation on various measures for schools. So I can talk about that.
Okay, I will talk a little bit about the actual case, about the project that Martina mentioned. Bratislava is preparing to climate change pilot application of measures in the field of sustainable rainwater management in urban areas. So this is the very long official title of the project. The project, as she explained, lasted for 3 years. The total allocation was over 3 million euros, of which 85% was coming from the EEA and Norway grants, and the rest was covered from the city budget and the state budget. We had several project partners together with the city. There were 2 city boroughs in the project, Bratislava Petržalka and Bratislava Nové Mesto, which are 2 quite large boroughs localized in the central and eastern part of the city. The Petržalka is a densely built-up area, mostly of housing function, and Bratislava Nové Mesto is also currently a very flourishing housing area where brownfields are being turned into housing areas and brownfields of former factories for food processing and chemical industry and so on. We also had a university as a partner, Bratislava Water Company, an NGO, Bratislava Regional Association for Nature Conservation, the general investor of Bratislava for actually carrying out the construction and looking over the building and construction of these projects, and we had several Norwegian partners. One of them was the Norwegian environmental consultancy company, and then we worked also with some national Norwegian water authorities. The main goals of the project were building more resilient public spaces, revitalizing public spaces that had previously no clear function of use, but we saw in them the potential of turning them into alternative spaces that could help us reduce the risk of urban heat islands and help us mitigate the effects of extreme rainfall. But also we wanted to include the public opinion in the design of these spaces. So the project had put an emphasis on participatory design, and also architectural competitions were ran in the process of preparing some of these sites for reconstruction. And one big output of the project was actually an action plan for adaptation to climate change for the upcoming 4 years. Altogether, there were 32 individual adaptation measures implemented at 10 sites. So one site had usually several blue and green, but also gray adaptation measures. So we were combining what was possible to combine at site. And we also, in some places, created some new components of green infrastructure. So now the rest of the presentation will be more pictures than text. And I will tell a bit more about each of these sites. So on these pictures you can see 2 project sites where we, as the leader of the consortium, were doing some revitalization work. The first 2 pictures on the top, this was a previous small piece of green in the old town city borough. The size was about 1,000 square meters, and this was turned together via several workshops and a survey with the people living in this area, turned into what you can see on the right. So it's now like a small pocket leisure park where there is a screen for watching movies, like an outdoor cinema, since next to this park is the Faculty of Movie Arts, and the students very much wanted some space where they can be active. And also there is a senior home, so this new park was made barrier-free for the seniors living next door in the senior home. Then there is an elementary school, so then we created a podium for them where they can come and have some events with the children. Another project was a green roof that was installed on a home for elderly. Both projects were approximately, speaking in terms of finances, around 200,000 euros. Also, part of the projects were 2 alleys that were reconstructing. This one is a historical alley in Bratislava city center, where the trees were in very bad health condition, and they had to be replaced together with an irrigation that had to be installed, and the new green bedding. So altogether there were, I think, I have to look into the papers, how many trees there were. More than 50 actually, so quite a big number. And the square is currently being revitalized, which is right next to this alley. It should have been part of the project, but then we were able to reconstruct this alley within the time frame that we had. Another project or two next projects were planting of trees in the quite dense city center, where in one of the squares there were no trees at all, and in the other one the trees were in very bad health and had a static disorder. So altogether 11 plus 4 trees were planted. These are ornamental pears, and in the other square we were able to plant a species that represents a bit more our country, which is the tilia tree. So these were relatively small projects. They together cost around roughly 80,000 euros. Another project focused more on blue infrastructure. This is in the leisure area, which is very close to the center of of Bratislava. It's called the Iron Well, or Železná studienka, as we call it, and there are several ponds which serve for fire protection of the nearby forests, but they also serve for fishing, and during winter people like to go skating there. So, but there was a problem of very high sedimentation, so we had to basically let the water out, take all the fish and other aquatic animals temporarily out of these ponds and put them into the 2 remaining ponds upstream, which were not part of this project. There had to be, the sediment had to be removed, and new discharge and refillment systems had to be installed in these places, together with some new walking routes and bridges that were also installed. This one, I think, was also roughly around 200,000 euros. This green area was revitalized by our partner, City Borough Petržalka, which in this area, in this square, the total amount of impermeable surfaces was reduced significantly. The whole area was disconnected from the sewage system, and now the rainwater is being used for irrigation of the flower beds in this area. Another project, quite big one, was another adaptation measure, big one, was implemented by Bratislava Nové Mesto. On the left, you can see the site of a former velodrome, which has been basically like left for degradation, and it was abandoned for several years, and now it has been turned into a multifunctional leisure area, where there is a cafeteria that has a green roof and a green wall. And it has a quite, because as a velodrome, the terrain has it looks like a depression, and they kept this depression-like terrain. They had to install a sustainable drainage system for this area in case of extreme waterfall, so that it doesn't end up looking like one big pond, the whole park. So that is quite unique in terms of scale in the whole Slovakia. Another interesting project that was implemented by Bratislava Nové Mesto partner was the chestnut orchard. Here there are around 100 chestnut trees which have been plagued by bark cancer, and they had to be treated in order to be saved, and this was part of the project. Also, it is in an area with quite a big gradient, and the idea was to also prevent it from further water erosion when it's raining, and also to give it some other functions. So it has been turned into an area where you can go with your dog, since there is a place where you can let him off leash, and also a place where you can go with your children, since in this particular area there are no places where you can go with children to spend some free time. So I'm coming towards the end of my presentation, and the last thing I would like to talk about is a follow-up activity that we have started when the project was over, and it was to support something on household level or house level, and we started a subsidy system which is aimed at private homeowners, NGOs, and small businesses. The people can ask for a maximum of €1,000 per applicant, or 50% of total costs. Additionally, the city provides also consultancy for applicants and dissemination options. So we just started it in 2016, and we had a very small number of applications, as you can see, but we learned that still it's not such a small number when we were consulting this with other cities that we met via the Covenant of Mayors Network. This year we had twice as many successful applicants, so we are quite happy. We had allocated a sum of together €90,000 in these last 2 years from the municipal budget for this subsidy system. As you can see, mostly people are using this money to build the rainwater tanks to help them irrigate their gardens, and the majority of the applicants use the full amount. So the maximum they can go for the €1,000. I will talk a bit about what we've learned so far and what is our outlook for the future. So we still consider ourselves a learning city in terms of adaptation and implementation of adaptation options and policy making. But we learned that it's very valuable for us to participate in projects where we can learn from other cities or from research institutions, and together we can create something. We also think it's, and we see it's very important, and the people want it, and they welcome our help and support, and also the subsidy system. And for us, we believe that it's very important for them to learn something by doing something, like doing these household adaptation options. For us as managers and people working in the municipality, we learned that time management is crucial, and actually implementing adaptation options you can meet quite a lot of obstacles. I'm now talking mostly about technical obstacles, especially if you're trying to do adaptation options in a historic center where you have different kind of measures and other policies that you have to obey, and preservation of cultural heritage, etc. And but on the other hand, we are trying to keep up also with the other sectors in terms of development of the city, and we are constantly looking at ways how to improve and how to integrate adaptation into other policies of the city. And last and not least, we think that the possibility to meet with other cities and exchange with them, and to come to events like these, but also participate in the other events that Covenant of Mayors is providing, like for example the city twinning is provided us with some valuable insights and knowledge, and we were already able to replicate some of this in the work that we are doing in the field of adaptation planning. So that's about it. I think we came to the end of the presentation finally. So thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you, Martina. Thank you, Eva. I think this gives a very good insight what a city can do. A city of, what you said, about 500,000 inhabitants. We have many of these kind of cities in Europe, and these are very practical examples in how you can turn a city more resilient to heavy rainwater events against heat waves and so on. So I would like to open up the floor for questions. There's 1, 2, Then let's take the first two questions. The others, please think of other question contributions.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Charles Lowe. I work for Insurance Europe here in Brussels. I'm just interested if you could elaborate a bit more on what you did in terms of awareness raising, number one, and how sort of enthusiastic or supportive people of Bratislava were towards this, number two.
Thank you. Again, Federico De Filippi from Sogesca. It seems that the model here is a bit different than the one from Copenhagen, in which about the funding they were completely independent, while it seems that you are a bit dependent from the external for the funding of the initiatives. I would like to understand first if there is a price to pay for this kind of external support, and then if you have any plans for future funding for increasing your independence for funding future measures. Thank you.
So I will answer your question in terms of awareness raising. Within this last project, Bratislava is preparing to climate change. We had an awareness raising campaign as part of the project, which means that we were participating in different events that have been well known among the public and were taking place annually in the city, where we always set up at least an information kiosk, and then also we via the subsidy system we are still mainstreaming the main ideas of this project, but we still we see that we need to work a lot more on the communication strategy, and we are trying to develop a communication strategy now, and it is one of our objectives in the action plan, so that we can use all our tools, all the tools that have been already tested with other cities. I think maybe I can also mention that in these other projects that are aimed at mitigation, there is consultancy for free. Every year there is a call for applications where people can apply with their house or garden or whatever it is, and they get free consulting from experts from different fields. So people that focus more on biodiversity, people that focus on preservation of cultural heritage, people that focus on the hydrological side and hydrological engineering, people that are architects. So, and this is done also free of charge.
About that second question, yes, of course, if the switching from using grants and external financing of adaptation measures to private cooperation is one of tasks of the city, because we all know what we will face after there will be more restrictions for this financing from EU grants. But still, as we mentioned, and we can see still that this Norwegian, especially Norway, really supports cooperation with their countries, these EEA countries, with all these regions. Besides these national grant systems for these respective countries, there is also kind of European cooperation grant systems. The call was published this month or in January, so still there are big opportunities for sharing these good experiences, starting new pilot projects, and using also this cooperation between cities and between institutions. That is a big favor, a big benefit of these projects. Of course, still this cooperation with private sector is one of our tasks that we also know, and trying also to work on this kind of matches, because many times there are these matches with private investors. Still, when city sets some requirements, and we must unfortunately say that Bratislava has many restrictions due to the past, that we cannot say what we want and follow these rules. Simply, this is kind of the heritage of the past, when Bratislava city is many times, and our even the chief architect department can still advise and require, but the implementation in practice is many times not followed in these kind of new smart plans. Yeah, so this is something that we still must find a way how to cooperate with this private sector, and also small businesses and the family houses and all small investors. So this is kind of our challenge for future.
Okay, thank you. More questions? There's one here, and one at the back, and third one, and the fourth one.
Thank you. My name is Antonio Negri from Italy. I just wanted to understand if the mitigation measures against the draft episode that seems to be very severe, like in Southern Europe as well, are just limited to incentivate or promote rainwater recovery by private, or also there are projects of bigger size promoted by the public? Thank you.
There was one.
Hi, Per from the city of Copenhagen. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit about what you were talking about at the end. You were talking about the different interests in the city. In Copenhagen, we talk a lot about, in lack of better words, the fight of the space. So there's a lot of interests in every street, on every square, and so on. So if you could elaborate on which challenges you see in that line of work.
Okay, I'm Pablo from the Energy Agency of Cádiz, Spain. You talk about participation. I'm interested to know how did you organize this participation in the project? Did you made it by neighborhood, for the whole city? A bit more, know a bit more the details of the participation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The first question, I'm not sure if I understood it well. You mean, well, what? Yes.
There are many initiatives of rainwater recovery with small.
Yes. Yes.
I'm wondering if there is also initiative of bigger size promoted by the public administration, the city of Bratislava.
Mm-hmm. Well, currently, no. This is the first subsidy scheme that we launched in terms of adaptation to climate change, and we were looking at, we wanted to initiate really small scale building level. So currently, no. The bigger ones we would like to cover in, again, from some external funds if we are lucky and if we are able to get some project money. We would like to look at possibilities of reopening rivers and streams that have been covered with concrete, you know, and disappeared and are somehow part of the underground of the city. So this is what we are looking at, because We are at the Danube River, but the area of Danube River is managed by other authorities, and the city has a split of authorities and management and caretaking of this area with governmental organizations from the Ministry of Environment. So that's why we are looking more at other options at the moment, but this is not to exclude that this is maybe what we will have to look at in the future. And we already see that this is going to be sooner or later a task, because we hear from experts working in the water management sector that how the city is expanding is changing, how groundwater levels are rising and going down, and how's the regime of the underground water. And we are living on a big reservoir of high quality drinking water, and we have a sort of regional responsibility in this way as well. Then you were asking about the different interests in the city. Of course, it's we have many interest groups. We have many activists in Bratislava. Bratislava is quite busy now in terms of new projects. New buildings, and also infrastructure is being either renovated or built in new areas. And as Martina explained, part of the regulations that we can issue also in terms of adaptation or mitigation to climate change are only recommendatory. So we only can recommendate that if you build a house, you will have a green roof. Currently, there is no legislation on this. And we are, together with our departments, we see that if we would have an instrument or a policy, local policy that could help us make this like a regulation, it would make things much more clear. Who is to do what? So we are thinking in this way, but we are still at the very beginning. This is more the talk among the decision makers, and we are more the implementators and people that check things on the ground level. So, but we have I saw also many similarities to your case. Or the organization in participation, specifically in this one project. I'm very sorry that our colleague cannot be with us, who was the communication manager for this project, because I am sure that she would do a much better job in talking about this, but I will try my best. For example, one of our projects, the Pocket Park, there was first an announcement in the borough, and then a series of workshops where people were invited. Actually, the attendance rates were quite high, and there were also several experts which we invited as department, because we thought it's good to have a nice mix of professions in such workshops, so that on the one hand we hear and we try to understand what the people living in the area would like this place to be turned into, but we felt that we need to have also professionals in these workshops that will explain why some things are possible and are not, or they don't recommend, and why. And in the end, this helped to meet a consensus. And what we were very happy about, and what came out as a lessons learned from this, was that as the construction was taking place, and there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of dust, you cannot avoid this when you want to turn something into a better place. We had very minimal negative feedback what you know, you usually hear in the news or you get emails full of complaints. This wasn't the case. So, and this is also what we advise to other departments in the municipality, that if you have a good participatory process, then it will be of mutual benefit, and then your own work you will be able to carry it out with under very good circumstances, and hopefully everyone is satisfied in the end. And then currently we are also running a big participation process in a development area in one of the city borough, and now my colleague, for example, she's been designing it just 1 year before she is actually able to launch it. So, but we are learning also new things in terms of participation.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Thank you, Martina, for this great insight. Let's give a final applause.
Thank you for having us.